They called it a routine security check. They said she had to comply. What started as cruel entertainment on a scorching desert training range turned into the most humbling 60 seconds of Corporal Trent Locke's military career. Because when they exposed Maya Reyes's lower back in front of everyone expecting laughter and submission, they found something else entirely: 5 small marks that made a sergeant major drop his clipboard and a phone call go straight to a number that doesn't exist in any directory. Stay with me until the end, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Nevada desert didn't apologize for its heat, and the Red Mesa Advanced Training Complex didn't apologize for its brutality. Both had a way of stripping people down to what they really were: no pretense, no second chances, no mercy for the unprepared. Lena Ward understood this better than most. She stood in the pre-dawn darkness outside Barracks C, her boots planted in the fine red dust that gave this godforsaken place its name. 34 years old, 5'7", 148 pounds of lean muscle and scar tissue. Army Staff Sergeant, 7 years in 3 deployments that officially never happened. She'd come here to rescreen for a Joint Special Operations Forces course, the kind of program that turned good soldiers into ghosts, into the operators who moved through the dark places of the world and left no trace except the silence they created. The problem was simple, brutal, and getting worse every day. She was failing. Not just failing, she was posting scores that would embarrass a basic trainee. Missed shots, botched reloads, hesitation in the kill house that got simulated hostages killed and friendly forces exposed. The kind of performance that made instructors shake their heads and reach for the administrative paperwork that meant one thing: you don't belong here. Lena pressed her back against the barracks wall, feeling the cool concrete through her PT shirt. Old habit. Always know what's behind you. Always map your exits. The sun hadn't yet cracked the horizon, but she could hear the bass waking up boots on pavement, the distant bark of commands, the metallic clang of equipment being prepped for another day of separating the capable from the merely willing. Her hands were steady as she checked her gear. They were always steady when no one was watching. "Hey, tourist," the voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Lena didn't flinch, another old habit, but she felt the familiar tension coil in her shoulders. She turned slowly, deliberately, and found exactly what she expected: First Lieutenant Evan Markham Goldenboy of the screening class, flanked by his usual trio. Markham moved like a man who'd never failed at anything in his life. 6'2", broad-shouldered, with the kind of symmetrical features and confident swagger that made officers want to promote him and made everyone else want to either follow him or punch him. He'd come to Red Mesa from an administrative posting, all polish and perfect paperwork, and somehow he'd been crushing every drill like he was born to it. Behind him stood his crew Peters, a wiry ranger with narrow eyes and a mean streak. Torres, built like a fire hydrant with the personality to match, and Miller, quiet but complicit, always ready with a smirk when Markham delivered his zingers. "Didn't see you at breakfast, Ward." Markham stopped 5 feet away, close enough to intimidate, far enough to maintain plausible deniability if anyone accused him of crowding her. "Oh, wait, you probably don't want the other candidates to see you eating. Might remind them that you're actually here." Peter snickered. "She's going for the invisible approach. Can't wash out if they forget you exist." Lena met Markham's eyes for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to show she wasn't intimidated, short enough to avoid confrontation. She'd dealt with men like this before. Hell, she'd served with them, bled with them, and in one memorable case in Kandahar, dragged one of them out of a burning vehicle while taking fire from 3 directions. But that was before, when she was someone else. When her hands did what she told them to do, when loud noises didn't lock her muscles up like a seized engine, when she could walk into a dark room without her heart trying to hammer through her ribs. "Just getting some air, sir." Her voice was flat, professional, completely empty of challenge or emotion. Markham tilted his head, studying her, like she was a particularly interesting specimen of failure. "You know what I heard? I heard you used to be good. Like actually competent. Makes me wonder what happened. Bad deployment, lost your nerve." "Or maybe she was never that good to begin with," Torres offered. "You know how it is, combat deployment doesn't mean combat. Plenty of people sit on a phobie for 6 months and come back calling themselves warriors." Lena's jaw tightened, the only sign that the words had landed. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep her hands relaxed at her sides, to not give them the reaction they were fishing for. "We've got range time in 20 minutes, she said quietly. "Should probably get ready, sir." Markham's smile had too many teeth. "Oh, I'm always ready, Ward. Question is, are you? Because from where I'm standing, you've been getting ready for 2 weeks and I haven't seen you pass a single drill clean." He stepped closer, dropping his voice to something that could almost pass for concerned. "Look, no shame in washing out. This program isn't for everyone. Hell, it's not for most people. Maybe you should save yourself the embarrassment and ring the bell now before Lieutenant Markham." The voice cracked across the space between them like a gunshot. Master Chief Aaron Rains stood 30 yards away, his silhouette cut sharp against the lightning sky. Even at a distance, the man radiated authority, not the borrowed kind that came with rank, but the earned kind that came from 23 years of doing the job and surviving. "You got time to run your mouth? You got time to run the obstacle course," Rains called out. "Twice. Full kit. Move." Markham's expression flickered just for an instant with something that might have been irritation, but he recovered smoothly, offering Rains a crisp nod. "Yes, Master Chief." As he turned to go, he leaned close to Lena, his voice barely a whisper. "Tick-tock, tourist. Clock's running out." Then he was gone, his crew trailing behind him like pilot fish following a shark. Lena stayed against the wall for another 30 seconds, willing her heart rate back to normal, forcing the tension out of her muscles. Her hands were still steady. They were always steady when no one was watching. But the moment she stepped onto the range, the moment she picked up a weapon with evaluators' eyes on her, the moment the world narrowed to the sound of a buzzer and the pressure of performance, that's when everything fell apart. She didn't understand it. Couldn't explain it. Only knew it was getting worse. The range was a sprawl of berms and steel targets, pop-up systems and shoot houses designed to simulate every nightmare scenario from urban combat to hostage rescue. Lena had run courses like this 100 times, before had run them in places where missing meant dying, where there were no second chances and no safe words to make the danger stop. But that was before. She stood at the firing line, now rifle in hand, waiting for the buzzer that would start the drill. Around her, the other candidates took their positions, Markham front and center, of course, with Peters and Torres flanking him. Further down the line, she caught sight of some of the other soldiers who'd been quietly professional with her. Ramirez, a Marine sergeant who'd given her a respectful nod on day one. Chen, an Air Force PJ, who moved like liquid efficiency, and Kowalski, an Army Ranger, who'd actually offered to help her with her reload drills. She'd politely declined. How could she explain that she knew exactly how to reload her hands, could do it in her sleep, could do it blindfolded, could do it while running or bleeding or both? The problem wasn't knowledge. The problem was something else entirely, something that lived in the space between intention and action, something that grabbed her by the throat every time someone was watching. "Candidates ready!" The range safety officer's voice boomed across the line. This is a qualification drill. You will engage all targets in sequence performing a tactical reload at the 50-yard line, then transition to pistol for close quarters targets. Time standard is 90 seconds. Any safety violations, and you are immediately disqualified. Any questions? Silence. Make ready. The sound of actions being charged, chambers being checked. Lena's hands went through the motions automatically. Magazine seated, bolt release, safety check, ready stance. All perfect. All textbook. She could feel her heartbeat starting to accelerate, feel the familiar pressure building behind her eyes. Not now. Please, not now. On the buzzer. The world contracted to a pinpoint. She could feel them watching her. Markham to her right, probably hoping she'd fail. The instructors behind her probably expecting her to fail. Her own hands steady still, but she could feel the tremor waiting just beneath the surface, waiting for the noise and the pressure and the eyes to trigger it. 3, 2, 1, bzzzt. She moved. Rifle up, first target squeeze, miss. Second target squeeze barely clipped the edge. She could hear the sharp reports from the other candidates' weapons, the metallic ping of their rounds hitting steel, could feel herself falling behind already. Breathe. Focus. She pushed forward toward the 50-yard line, engaging targets as she went, her accuracy slightly better, but still sloppy, still nowhere near the standard she'd once held herself to. At the 50-yard line, she dropped to a knee for the tactical reload magazine, out fresh one, in tap, rack, bang, to confirm the chamber. Her hands went through the motions, but they felt disconnected somehow, like she was watching herself from a distance. A sharp crack of a rifle to her left. Someone's round snapped past, uncomfortably close. The sound hit her like a physical blow. Suddenly she was back in Mosul 3 years ago, in a room too dark and too small, with gunfire coming through the walls, and the smell of burning plastic and cordite thick enough to choke on. She was reaching for a wounded teammate, blood hot on her hands, her rifle speaking its sharp language into the darkness. Ward, move! The instructor's shout snapped her back. She blinked, realized she'd frozen at the 50-yard line, rifle half raised, her reload incomplete. Around her, the other candidates had already transitioned to pistols, were engaging the close quarters targets. Failing. She was failing right now in real time, and everyone could see it. She forced herself to move to finish the reload, to transition to pistol, but her hands were shaking now, and her breath was coming too fast. She engaged the remaining targets, hit maybe half of them, and when the buzzer sounded to end the drill, she was still firing at steel that had already been neutralized. Cease fire, cease fire. All candidates make your weapons safe, and step back from the line. Lena's hands steadied immediately, making her weapons safe with the kind of precision that would have been useful 60 seconds earlier. She stepped back. Eyes forward, face carefully blank. The range safety officer moved down the line, checking targets, calling out scores. When he reached her station, he didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, Ward, 53 seconds overtime, 42% accuracy. See me after formation. He moved on. She stood there, rifle slung, hands at her sides, feeling the weight of judgment from every direction. Brutal, she heard Torres mutter to Peters. How is she even still here? Diversity quota, Peters whispered back. They need to show they gave a woman a shot even if she's not cut out for it. Lena's jaw clenched. She'd heard variations of that line before, usually right before she'd outperformed whoever was saying it. But that was before. Now she didn't have performance to hide behind. Now she was exactly what they said she was, someone who didn't belong. Markham's score came back 91% accuracy, 5 seconds under time. Of course. The mess hall at lunch was a brutal social ecosystem. The strongest candidates sat together loud and confident, rehashing their performances with the kind of easy camaraderie that came from shared success. The middle tier clustered in their own groups, still optimistic, still believing they could make the cut. And then there were the ones on the bubble, the ones who knew they were hanging by a thread. Lena sat alone at a corner table, her back to the wall, eyes automatically tracking entrances and exits. Another old habit. In Mosul, the corner table with a clear view of the doors had saved her life when an insurgent had walked into a supposed safe cafe with a vest full of explosives. She'd seen him coming, had moved before anyone else registered. The threat had gotten herself and 3 other soldiers out the back before the blast turned the front half of the building into flying shrapnel and pink mist. But here, the only thing that threatened her was humiliation and the slow death of a career she'd given everything to. She pushed food around her tray without much interest. Across the room, Markham's table was a knot of energy and laughter, probably reliving his perfect run on the range, probably already planning his next flawless performance. "Mind if I sit?" Lena looked up to find Master Chief Rains standing there with his own tray. He didn't wait for an answer, just settled into the chair across from her, with the kind of economical movement that spoke of a body that knew exactly how it worked. Rains was in his mid-40s, built like a steel cable with gray threading through his dark hair, and eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine and wouldn't believe if you told them. He'd been a SEAL for 15 years before transitioning to training duty, and rumor had it he'd been part of some of the darkest operations in recent military history, the kind that happened in countries the U.S. officially wasn't operating in, against enemies whose existence was classified. "You looked good out there today," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Lena blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Sir." "Your weapon handling." Rains took a bite of whatever mystery meat the mess hall was serving today, chewed thoughtfully. "Your ready stance, your approach to the line, all textbook, better than textbook efficient, professional." She stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But the moment that buzzer went off, you fell apart. His eyes locked onto hers. "Why?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a genuine question asked with the kind of direct honesty that Lena had learned to associate with operators, men and women who'd been through enough hell that they didn't have time for bullshit anymore. "I don't know, Master Chief." The truth raw and bitter. "I used to be good at this. I used to be..." She caught herself, old security protocols kicking in, reminding her that she couldn't talk about certain things, couldn't explain certain skills, couldn't reference certain operations that officially never happened. "You used to be what?" Rains pressed. "Better," she finished quietly. "I used to be better." Rains nodded slowly, like that answer told him more than she'd intended to reveal. "You deploy 3 times. Various locations. Combat, some. The understatement of the year. She had 12 confirmed kills in close quarters combat, had been part of a direct action team that had dismantled an insurgent network over 9 months of operations that would never appear in any official record. She'd been good, not just competent, but exceptional. The kind of operator that other operators wanted on their 6. And then Kandahar happened. The ambush that went wrong. The IED that detonated too close. The teammate she couldn't save, whose blood she could still feel on her hands when she let herself remember. She'd come home with a commendation and a medical evaluation that cleared her for duty. They'd checked her body, found it intact, functional, still capable. They'd asked her the standard questions about nightmares and flashbacks and suicidal ideation. She'd given them the standard answers, the ones that kept her career alive. What they hadn't checked, what they couldn't check, was the thing that broke inside her when she'd tried to return to operational duty and found that her body wouldn't cooperate anymore. The disconnect between what she knew and what she could execute. The tremor that appeared the moment she was being evaluated, being watched, being measured. Ward. Rains leaned forward slightly. I've been doing this job for a long time. I've seen hundreds of candidates come through here. Some are all flash. They look good on paper, perform well in controlled environments. But put them in the real world, and they fold. Others are the opposite. They're quiet, careful, look like they're holding back. But when it counts, when everything goes sideways and the shooting starts for real, they're the ones still standing when the smoke clears. He paused, holding her gaze. You strike me as the second type. So I'm asking you again, why are you failing? Lena felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but fracturing like ice under pressure. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? How could she tell this man that she was trapped inside her own body, that she had all the knowledge and none of the ability to execute it when it mattered? I don't know, Master Chief, she said again, and hated how defeated she sounded. I honestly don't know. Rains studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. But Ward, I'm watching you. Not because I think you're going to fail, because I think you're hiding something. And whatever it is, you better figure it out quick, because the admin office is already drawing up your dismissal paperwork. The words hit her like a gut punch. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made it real. How long do I have? Friday. Rains stood picking up his tray. You've got one more evaluation Friday morning. Pass that and you stay. Fail it. He let the sentence hang. 3 days. She had 3 days to fix whatever was broken inside her, or her career was over. Rains turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, Sergeant, I don't think you're weak. I think you're wounded. There's a difference. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone at her corner table, back to the wall, eyes on the exits, with the weight of 3 days pressing down on her like a physical force. Across the room, Markham caught her eye and raised his water bottle in a mock toast, his smile predatory and certain. Tick-tock, she could almost hear him say. Tick-tock, tourist. That afternoon's exercise was close-quarters battle in the kill house, a sprawling structure of rooms and corridors designed to simulate urban combat. Teams of 4 would clear the building, neutralizing hostile targets while protecting simulated hostages. Every movement was monitored, every shot recorded, every decision analyzed. Lena found herself paired with Markham Peters and Torres. Of course, the universe had a sense of humor. All right, listen up. Markham gathered them in the staging area, laying out the structure's blueprint. Standard room clearing protocol. I'll take Point Peters on my 6. Torres, your middle. Ward, your rear security. Rear security. The position reserved for the weakest link, the one you couldn't trust in the critical moments. The position that kept her out of the main action. Sir, I can... Lena started. You can watch our backs. Markham cut her off smoothly. That's what you can do. Last thing I need is you freezing up in a fatal funnel and getting us all killed. You good with that, or do you need to ring the bell right now? Peters and Torres watched her, waiting for her reaction. The smart play was to accept the assignment, to swallow her pride and do the job she was given. Fighting Markham here would only make things worse. Roger that, sir. The words tasted like ash. They geared up helmets, armor plates, training weapons loaded with simunition that would sting like hell, but wouldn't cause permanent damage. The instructors ran through the scenario, unknown number of hostiles. 3 hostages, expect resistance. Standard nightmare. The buzzer sounded. They moved. Markham was fast aggressive, hitting the first room hard with Peters right behind him. Training rounds snapped through the air as they engaged pop-up targets. Torres followed them in moving smooth and efficient. Lena hung back at the doorway, rifle up, covering the hallway behind them. Rear security, doing her job, hating every second of it. The team flowed through the building, second room, third room, one hostage secured. Markham was calling the shots, directing movement, and Lena had to admit he was good at it. Fast, decisive, aggressive. The kind of operator who moved with absolute confidence. Maybe too much confidence. They hit the fourth room, and it all went wrong. Markham breached hard, pushing deep into the room before checking his corners. A pop-up hostile appeared at his 9 o'clock, the exact spot he'd failed to clear. Peters tried to swing his weapon around, but the angle was wrong. Torres was blocked by Markham's body position, and the hostile's simulated weapon flashed red. "Markham down," the instructor's voice boomed through the overhead speakers. "You took 3 rounds center mass. You're KIA. Remove yourself from the exercise." Markham froze, his face going red. "That's bullshit. Lieutenant, you are combat ineffective. Remove yourself. Now." Markham stormed out of the kill house, shoulder-checking the doorframe hard enough to make it rattle. Peters and Torres exchanged glances suddenly without their leader. "Ward, your team lead," the instructor announced. "Continue the exercise." And just like that, Lena was exactly where she didn't want to be, making decisions, being watched, being evaluated. Her heart rate spiked immediately, her breath coming faster. But they were mid-exercise. Hostages were waiting. The mission didn't stop just because she was terrified. "Torres, take point. Peters with me. Standard sweep." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. They moved. The next 2 rooms went clean, slow, methodical. None of Markham's aggressive flash, but also none of his mistakes. They secured the second hostage, neutralized 3 more pop-up hostiles, worked their way deeper into the structure. Then they hit the final room, the one that would have the last hostage and the highest concentration of threats. The killing room. Lena's hands were shaking now, the tremor she'd been fighting all day finally breaking through. She could feel Peters and Torres watching her, waiting for her to make the call. The doorway yawned ahead of them like a throat, and all she could see was that room in Mosul, the one where everything had gone wrong, where she'd lost. A sharp bang echoed through the kill house, one of the instructors dropping a flashbang simulator in a nearby room, testing their reactions. The sound hit Lena like an electric shock. Suddenly she was back in Kandahar, the IED going off the world, turning into fire and flying metal and screaming. Her teammate burning her hands, reaching for him, the smell of cooked flesh, and "Ward," Peters hissed. "Ward, call it." She couldn't move. Her muscles had locked up completely, her rifle frozen at low ready, her entire body rigid with a terror that belonged to another place and time, but felt absolutely real in this moment. Torres swore under his breath, pushed past her, breached the final room without proper support. She heard the pop of simunition, heard Torres grunt, heard the instructor's voice. Torres down, hostile remains in the room." Peters tried to follow, but without proper cover, without coordination. Another pop. Peters down. The exercise ended with 2 more casualties and 1 hostage dead because Lena had frozen at the critical moment. The silence afterward was brutal. The debrief room felt like an execution chamber. Lena sat rigid in her chair while the senior instructor, a grizzled Special Forces colonel named Hendricks, reviewed the footage on the screen behind him. "Let's talk about what happened in room 7. Hendricks' voice was flat, completely empty of emotion. "Lieutenant Markham breached without clearing his corners. Fatal mistake. Markham, you would be dead. Your aggressive posture got you killed and nearly compromised your team." Markham's jaw was tight, but he nodded. Yes, sir. However, Hendricks turned his attention to Lena. Your team's subsequent performance under Sergeant Ward's leadership was competent until the final room. Ward walked me through your decision-making at that doorway. Every eye in the room was on her. Markham looked smug despite his own failure. Peters and Torres looked disgusted. The other candidates watched with the kind of morbid fascination people had for car accidents. Lena's voice came out rough. I hesitated, sir, lost situational awareness, made a poor decision. You made no decision, Hendricks corrected. You froze completely. A flashbang simulator, a noise you should have been expecting in a training environment, locked you in place while your teammates pushed forward without support and were subsequently neutralized. Your hesitation got 2 operators and 1 hostage killed. In a real-world scenario, what does that mean? It means mission failure, sir. It means people die. Correct. Hendricks closed the laptop, the screen going dark. Ward, I'm recommending you for medical evaluation and administrative separation from this course. Your combat ineffective due to what appears to be post-traumatic stress response. This isn't a judgment on your character or your service record, it's a safety issue. For you, and for anyone who might depend on you in the field. The words landed like hammer blows. Medical evaluation. Administrative separation. It was over. Sir, if I could just... Lena started. Dismissed, Hendricks said, not unkindly, but with absolute finality. Report to the admin building at 0800 tomorrow to begin out processing. You'll have until Friday to clear the base. Lena managed a proper salute and walked out of the room with her spine straight and her eyes forward and the certain knowledge that her career, everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed for, was ending in the most humiliating way possible. Behind her, she heard Markham's voice, barely a whisper, but loud enough. Told you, tourist. And this time, she couldn't even argue. The rest of the day passed in a gray haze. Lena went through the motions, cleaned her weapons, stowed her gear, responded to questions with monosyllables. She felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything essential, leaving only the shell. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk in the barracks, listening to the sounds of the other candidates, some already asleep, others talking quietly, processing their own performances, probably relieved that at least they weren't her. At 0400, she gave up on sleep and headed to the range. The pre-dawn darkness was complete, the desert sky scattered with more stars than seemed possible. The range was empty, silent, except for the whisper of wind across the berms. Lena signed out a weapon and ammunition from the sleepy armorer, then walked out to lane 7, her lucky number, though luck hadn't done her much good lately. She loaded a magazine with practiced precision, her hands steady in the darkness. Always steady when no one was watching. She took her stance, raised the rifle, centered the sights on a target 25 yards out. Breathed out slowly, squeezed. The shot broke clean the round, punching through the target's center mass. Perfect. She ran through a full magazine, 30 rounds, 30 perfect hits. Tactical reload, smooth as silk. Another magazine engaging multiple targets, transitioning between positions. Every shot exactly where she wanted it. Every movement efficient, professional, flawless. This was who she was in the dark, when no one was watching, when there was no evaluation and no judgment and no eyes measuring her performance. This was the operator she used to be, still living somewhere inside the broken soldier she'd become. You move different when you think no one's looking. Lena spun rifle coming up before conscious thought finger indexed along the frame muzzle pointed safe. Master Chief Rains stood 15 feet away, Hands visible, expression unreadable in the darkness. "Easy, Ward." His voice was calm. "Just me." She lowered the weapon, her heart hammering. "Sir? Didn't hear you approach." "I know. Good situational awareness." He moved closer, gestured at the targets. "Mind if I check your work?" She stepped aside. Rains walked down range with a small flashlight examining the paper targets. When he came back, his expression was thoughtful. 30 rounds, 30 hits, all in the vital zone. Your groupings are tighter than Markham's best run." He studied her in the dim light. "So explain to me why 6 hours ago you couldn't hit water if you fell out of a boat." Lena opened her mouth, closed it. How could she explain the inexplicable? "It's the eyes, isn't it?" Rains said quietly. "The moment someone's watching, something happens. You lock up. But here alone, you're exactly as good as I suspected you were." She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The truth was too complicated, too classified, too bound up in operations she couldn't talk about, and trauma she couldn't process, and a conditioning she didn't fully understand herself. Rains let the silence stretch. Then, "Ward, I pushed back on your dismissal paperwork. Bought you 48 hours. You've got your final evaluation Friday morning, and I convinced Hendricks to let you run it solo, no other candidates, minimal observers. It's your last chance." "Why?" The question came out harsh, almost accusatory. "Why would you do that? You saw what happened in the kill house. You know I'm going to fail." "Because I've seen operators like you before." Rain's voice was hard now, almost angry. "Quiet professionals who've been through hell, who've done things they can't talk about, who've proven themselves in the real world but can't seem to function in a training environment. You know what the common thread is with people like that?" Lena shook her head. "They're not broken. They're contained." He let that hang in the air for a moment. "I don't know your full story, Ward, and I'm not asking. But I know enough to know there's more going on here than simple PTSD. So I'm giving you 48 hours to figure out how to unlock whatever it is that's holding you back. Because if that operator I just watched shoot in the dark shows up on Friday, you'll pass this course with flying colors. And if the scared soldier from the kill house shows up," he shrugged, "well then Hendricks was right, and you should wash out." He turned to go, then paused. "One more thing. There's a black SUV parked outside the admin building. Been there since yesterday. Government plates, no unit markings. Whoever's in that vehicle has been asking questions about you. Might want to figure out who that is before Friday." Then he was gone, dissolving into the darkness like a ghost, leaving Lena alone on the range with her perfect targets and her impossible questions. And 48 hours until the end of everything. She looked down at her hands. Still steady. Always steady when no one was watching. The problem was Friday morning, everyone would be watching. And she had no idea how to be herself when the world was looking. The sun rose over Red Mesa like a judge ascending the bench, harsh and unforgiving, turning the desert into a furnace before most people had finished their first cup of coffee. Lena had been awake for hours, her body running on the kind of exhausted adrenaline that came from too many sleepless nights and too many unanswered questions. The black SUV was exactly where Master Chief Rains said it would be. She stood at the corner of the admin building, partially concealed by the shadow of the overhang, watching the vehicle. It was a standard government-issue suburban dark-tinted windows, Nevada plates that meant nothing and everything. No unit markings, no bumper stickers, nothing that would identify who owned it or why they were here. But the way it sat, nose pointed toward the exit, backed into the parking spot for quick egress that told her everything about the people inside. They were professionals. They were watching. And they were here for something specific. Or someone. Lena's instincts, honed by years of operations in places where being watched meant being targeted, screamed at her to move, to get out of sight, to treat this like the threat it probably was. But another part of her, the part that was tired of running, tired of being afraid, tired of failing, wanted answers. She was still trying to decide which impulse to follow when the rear passenger door opened and a man stepped out. He was maybe 50, built like a middleweight boxer, gone slightly soft around the edges, wearing civilian clothes that were too neat to be casual khakis and a polo shirt that screamed federal contractor or intelligence liaison. He spotted her immediately, as if he'd been expecting her to be standing exactly where she was, and offered a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Sergeant Ward," he called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot with the kind of projection that suggested military training. "Got a minute?" Every fiber of Lena's being told her to walk away. Nothing good came from mysterious government vehicles and men who knew your name before you knew theirs. But she'd been running from her past for 3 years, and maybe, just maybe, the past was finally catching up in a way that mattered. She walked toward him, keeping her hands visible, her posture neutral. Old habits. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting at distant horizons or reading classified documents in bad lighting. He had the look of someone who'd spent time in the field, but now lived behind a desk making the kinds of decisions that other people had to execute. "You know who I am?" he asked. "No idea." Lena stopped 10 feet away. "But you clearly know who I am, so let's skip the mystery and get to the point." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Fair enough. My name's Mitchell. I work for a division of the Defense Department that doesn't have a catchy acronym. I'm here because I've been watching your performance this past 2 weeks, and I need to understand something." He paused, studying her face like he was looking for something specific. "Why are you failing?" The question again. Everyone wanted to know why she was failing, as if there was a simple answer, a switch that could be flipped, a magic word that would make everything make sense. "If I knew that," Lena said carefully, "I wouldn't be getting kicked out on Friday." "That's the thing, though." Mitchell took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I don't think you're failing because you can't do the job. I think you're failing because something won't let you do the job. And I think you know exactly what that something is." Lena's blood went cold. The way he said it, the specificity, the certainty, meant this wasn't a fishing expedition. This was confirmation of something he already knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but the words came out too defensive, too quick. "Mosul 2022, Mitchell said quietly. "Kandahar 2023. Operations that officially never happened, conducted by teams that officially don't exist. Direct action. Close quarters battle. High-value target elimination. You were part of a classified program, Sergeant. Codename Switchback." The word hit her like a physical blow. Switchback. She hadn't heard that word spoken aloud in 3 years, hadn't let herself think about it, had buried it so deep that sometimes she could almost convince herself it had been a dream, a hallucination, something that happened to someone else. "I can't talk about that," she managed, her throat tight. "I'm not asking you to." Mitchell glanced around, making sure they were still alone. "I'm read into the program. I know what you did. I know what was done to you, and I know why you're failing here." Lena's hands were shaking now, and not from fear, from rage, from 3 years of confusion and self-doubt, and wondering if she was broken, if she was weak, if she was crazy. And this man, this stranger, was standing here telling her he knew. He'd always known. "Then why didn't you help me?" The words came out raw, almost a snarl. "Why did you let me come here, let me humiliate myself, let me fail over and over when you knew?" "Because I needed to be sure. Mitchell interrupted, his voice hardening. The Switchback Protocols were experimental, controversial. After what happened in Kandahar, after we lost good people because of system failures and bad intelligence, the program was suspended. Everyone involved was debriefed, evaluated, and released back to conventional units. But the conditioning, the protocols that were embedded in you, those don't just go away. They can't be turned off with a simple debrief and a handshake. He paused, letting that sink in. You were conditioned not to operate at full capacity without authorization. It was a safety measure, a way to ensure that operators with your skill set couldn't be compromised, couldn't be turned, couldn't use their training against friendly forces. The conditioning was supposed to be reversible, but after the program shut down, the reversal protocols were classified above my clearance level, locked away, buried. Lena felt like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. All this time she'd thought she was broken, thought she'd lost her nerve, lost her edge, lost whatever essential quality had made her capable. But it wasn't her at all. It was something that had been done to her, implanted in her mind, like a lock without a key. So I'm stuck like this, she said flatly. Unable to perform when it matters. Unable to do the job I was trained for. Not necessarily. Mitchell reached into his pocket, pulled out a slim folder. There's a man coming here tomorrow. A SEAL commander named Cole Maddox. He was one of the original architects of the Switchback program. If anyone can unlock what was done to you, it's him. But Ward... He met her eyes, and there was something like warning in his expression. You need to understand what you're asking for. The conditioning was put in place for a reason. Remove it, and you go back to being what you were, a direct action operator with a specific set of very lethal skills and no psychological safety barrier. Some people come back from that and live normal lives. Others, he let the sentence hang. Others become a danger to themselves and everyone around them, Lena finished. She'd seen it before in the aftermath of operations that went too far in operators who couldn't come back from the dark places they'd been sent. The ones who ate their service weapons, or drove their cars into bridge abutments, or simply disappeared into the population like ghosts haunting the edges of society. I'm not going to lie to you, Mitchell said. This is a risk. But it's also your only chance. Because right now you're trapped between two worlds. You have the skills but can't access them, and it's tearing you apart. At least if we remove the conditioning, you'll know who you really are, what you're really capable of, and then you can decide what to do with that. Lena looked away across the desert that stretched to the horizon, empty and brutal and honest in its hostility. She thought about the past 2 weeks, the humiliation and the failure, and the feeling of being trapped inside her own body, watching herself drown and unable to reach out a hand to save herself. She thought about Markham's sneering face, about Torres and Peter's whispered insults, about the certainty that she was weak, that she'd lost something essential. And she thought about those moments in the dark on the range when no one was watching, when her hands remembered who she was and her body moved with the precision and confidence of someone who had never doubted herself. When does Maddox arrive? She asked. Tomorrow afternoon. But Ward, there's something else you need to know. Mitchell's expression darkened. The reason I'm here, the reason we're having this conversation at all, is because someone in the intelligence community flagged your name. Someone who knows about Switchback, who knows what you're capable of, and who might not want you to be unlocked. There are people who think the program was a mistake, who think operators like you are too dangerous to exist outside of a controlled environment. If they had their way, you'd wash out of this course and disappear into some administrative posting where you'd never touch a weapon again. Who? Lena demanded. Who's trying to bury me? I don't know. That's the problem. Mitchell handed her the folder. This contains everything I could dig up on the current status of Switchback, which isn't much because most of it's been redacted or destroyed, but it might help you understand what's at stake. And Ward, watch your back. If someone's actively trying to ensure you fail, They might not stop at passive observation, and he turned back toward the SUV, then paused. One more thing. Your final evaluation on Friday, Master Chief Rains pushed for it to be solo minimal observers. That's good. That gives us a controlled environment for what needs to happen. But between now and then, keep your head down. Don't give anyone ammunition to use against you. And for God's sake, don't tell anyone about this conversation. Then he was gone, sliding back into the SUV, which pulled out of the parking lot, with the smooth efficiency of a well-rehearsed extraction. Lena stood there, holding the folder, feeling like she'd just been handed a grenade with the pin already pulled. Inside were documents heavily redacted, stamped with classification markings she'd only seen a handful of times in her career. She flipped through them quickly, her eyes catching fragments. Psychological conditioning protocols. Authorization-dependent performance release, fail-safe mechanisms for asset control, adverse reactions in 3% of subjects. She closed the folder before she could read more, her hands trembling. Asset control. That's what she'd been. Not a soldier. Not an operator. An asset to be controlled, switched on and off like a machine. The rage that surged through her was so sudden and so complete that for a moment she couldn't breathe. 3 years. 3 years of thinking she was broken, of doubting herself, of watching her career circle the drain while she clawed desperately for answers. And the whole time it had been them, the nameless bureaucrats and program architects, who'd decided that the best way to handle highly trained killers was to put a lock on their abilities to make them dependent on authorization from above. She wanted to scream, wanted to punch something, wanted to find whoever had signed off on Switchback and make them understand physically and violently what they'd done to her. Instead, she took 3 deep breaths, forced the rage down into the place where she kept all the other things that would destroy her if she let them out, and walked toward the barracks. She had 1 day until Maddox arrived. 1 day to keep her head down, to not give anyone a reason to accelerate her dismissal, to survive until tomorrow afternoon. 1 day to decide if she really wanted to unlock whatever had been caged inside her. The morning PT session was brutal by design, an obstacle course that combined endurance, strength, and the kind of mental toughness that separated real candidates from the pretenders. Lena ran it with the rest of her class, her body going through the motions automatically while her mind spun through the implications of Mitchell's revelation. She was halfway through the rope climb when she heard a sharp metallic snap, the sound of something breaking under tension. She looked up just in time to see the rope above her start to fray, individual strands popping free like overstressed guitar strings. Instinct kicked in before conscious thought. She dropped, landing hard on the crash mat below, rolling with the impact to distribute the force. 2 seconds later, the rope gave way completely, the severed end whipping down to slap the ground where she'd been hanging. "Hold!" The instructor's voice rang out across the course. "Everyone off the obstacles now!" The other candidates scrambled down, their expressions ranging from confused to concerned. Lena stayed on the mat, staring up at the frayed rope, her heart hammering. That rope had been fine yesterday. She'd checked it herself during equipment inspection. Climbing ropes didn't just fail, not unless they'd been damaged. Master Chief Rains appeared beside her, his face carved from stone. "You hurt?" "No, Master Chief. Just shaken." He looked up at the rope, his eyes narrowing. Then he turned to one of the junior instructors. "Tag that rope for inspection. I want a full equipment check on everything in this course. Now." As the instructors moved to comply, Markham sidled up to Lena, his expression hovering somewhere between concern and something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. "Damn, Ward. That was close. You got lucky." "Yeah," she said slowly, standing up and dusting off her uniform. "Lucky." But as she met his eyes, she saw something flicker there, just for an instant too quick to be certain, that made her wonder if luck had anything to do with it. Mitchell's warning echoed in her head, someone might not want you to be unlocked. The question was, who? And how far were they willing to go? The rest of the day passed in a paranoid haze. Lena found herself checking her gear, obsessively examining her rifle for signs of tampering, testing her magazines to make sure they fed properly, inspecting every piece of equipment before she used it. She caught Rains watching her more than once, his expression unreadable, and wondered if he'd come to the same conclusion she had: the rope hadn't failed by accident. Lunch in the mess hall was a minefield of social dynamics. She grabbed her tray and headed for her usual corner table, only to find it occupied by Markham and his crew. They didn't acknowledge her presence, just kept talking amongst themselves, but their body language made it clear she wasn't welcome. Fine. She found another table. This one with a clear view of the entrance and the kitchen old habits, again always calculating fields of fire and escape routes, even in supposedly safe spaces. Mind if I sit? Lena looked up to find Kowalski standing there, tray in hand, his expression carefully neutral. The Army Ranger who'd offered to help her with reload drills that first week before she'd politely declined. Before everyone had figured out she was a lost cause. "It's a free country," she said, which wasn't exactly an invitation but wasn't a rejection either. Kowalski started eating without comment. They sat in silence for a full minute before he spoke. "That rope thing this morning was messed up. Accidents happen. That wasn't an accident." He kept his voice low, his eyes on his food. "I checked that rope during my equipment inspection 2 days ago. It was solid. No fraying, no wear, no damage. Someone cut it not all the way through, just enough to weaken it so it would fail under load." Lena's hand tightened on her fork. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're getting screwed." Kowalski finally looked up at her. "I don't know your story, don't know what's going on with your performance issues. But I've been watching, and something doesn't add up. You move like a pro between drills. Your gear's always squared away. You've got good situational awareness. But the moment evaluation starts, you fall apart." He paused. "Either you're the unluckiest soldier I've ever met, or someone's actively trying to make sure you fail. And after this morning, I'm leaning toward the second option." "You should stay out of it," Lena said quietly. "Whatever this is, it's my problem. No reason for you to get caught in the blast radius." "Maybe." Kowalski went back to his food. "But here's the thing, I came here to train with the best, to learn from people who know what they're doing. And I got a feeling that if you could actually show us what you're capable of, we'd all learn something valuable. So yeah, it's your problem, but it's also a waste of potential, and I don't like waste." Before Lena could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A small cluster of brass had entered officers she didn't recognize, wearing uniforms that were too clean for people who spent time in the field. Behind them walked a man in civilian clothes who moved with the kind of loose confidence that screamed Special Operations loose canvas pants, a simple t-shirt that did nothing to hide his build, and eyes that swept the room with professional assessment. Commander Cole Maddox had arrived a day early. Lena knew it was him before anyone said a word. Something about his presence, the way other operators in the room subtly oriented toward him, the way even the senior instructors straightened their posture, marked him as someone important, someone dangerous, someone who'd earned respect the hard way. His eyes found her across the mess hall, held her gaze for exactly 2 seconds, long enough to acknowledge, not long enough to draw attention, and then moved on. But in those 2 seconds, Lena felt something shift inside her, like a lock tumbling into place, like a door that had been sealed shut, suddenly developing cracks in its frame. "Who's that?" Kowalski asked, following her line of sight. "No idea," Lena lied. "Must be somebody important." But she knew. And more importantly, he knew. And whatever happened next, whatever Mitchell had set in motion by bringing Maddox here, it was going to change everything. She just wasn't sure if change would mean salvation or destruction. That evening, Lena found herself in the equipment cage, ostensibly cleaning her rifle, but really just killing time until she could figure out what to do next. Maddox was here. The final evaluation was tomorrow, and someone, maybe multiple someones, wanted to make sure she failed before any of that mattered. The equipment cage was a large storage area filled with racks of weapons, shelves of ammunition, and the controlled chaos of military gear that needed constant maintenance. She'd signed out her rifle for evening cleaning, claiming she wanted to ensure it was perfect for tomorrow, and the armorer had shrugged and waved her through. Now she sat at one of the cleaning benches, field stripping her weapon with automatic precision, her mind spinning through scenarios and outcomes. "Your disassembly is flawless." Lena's hands stopped moving. She hadn't heard anyone approach, which should have been impossible, in a room with a concrete floor and metal racks. She turned slowly and found Commander Maddox leaning against a weapons rack, his arms crossed, watching her with the kind of clinical interest a mechanic might show a precision engine. "Sir," she said, coming to her feet, rifle parts scattered on the bench behind her. "Relax, Sergeant Ward. This isn't an official visit." He moved closer, picked up her bolt carrier group, examined it. "Mitchell told me about your situation, told me what you've been going through. I want you to know what happened to you, what was done to you that was never supposed to be permanent. The Switchback Protocols were designed as a temporary measure, something that could be reversed once operators rotated out of the program." "Then why wasn't it reversed?" The question came out harder than she intended. "Because the people who knew how to reverse it are dead or scattered, and the documentation was classified at a level that makes it effectively invisible." Maddox set down the bolt carrier, met her eyes. "I helped design those protocols. I argued against them, actually thought they were too invasive, too risky, too much playing God with people's neurology. But I was overruled by people who cared more about control than capability. And then Kandahar happened and the whole program imploded and everyone ran for cover. And I got left behind," Lena finished, "locked inside my own head, unable to function." "Not unable," Maddox corrected. "Unauthorized. There's a difference. The conditioning doesn't remove your skills or your training. It just prevents you from accessing them without proper authorization. It's like having a car with a perfect engine, but no key to start it." He paused, studying her face. "Mitchell asked me to come here. Asked me if I could undo what was done. The truth is, I'm not sure." The authorization protocols were complex, multi-layered, designed to resist tampering or premature activation. But there's a backdoor, a command phrase that was supposed to be used only in absolute emergencies, when an operator needed to be unlocked immediately, regardless of circumstance. Lena's heart was pounding now. "And you know this phrase? I helped create it. The question is whether you want me to use it." Maddox's expression was grave. "Because once I unlock you, there's no going back. You'll be what you were before. Switchback, a direct action operator with extensive combat experience and no psychological barriers to using lethal force. For some people, that's freedom. For others, it's a curse. They can't turn off what they were trained to be, can't separate the operator from the person, can't function in normal society. I've seen good people destroy themselves because they couldn't handle being unlocked." "And if you don't unlock me," Lena asked, "I wash out tomorrow. I go back to some administrative job where I spend the rest of my career filing paperwork and wondering who I used to be. Is that better? That's not for me to decide." Maddox stepped back, giving her space. "But I'll tell you this tomorrow morning during your final evaluation. I'm going to be there. Master Chief Rains has agreed to let me observe. If you want to be unlocked, if you want to take that risk, all you have to do is give me a signal." "Any signal? A nod, a gesture doesn't matter." "Doesn't. And I'll speak the phrase, and whatever happens after that is on you." "What if I fail anyway?" The question came out small, vulnerable. What if you unlock me and I'm still not good enough? Then at least you'll fail honestly as yourself with no one to blame but your own limitations. Maddox's voice softened slightly. But Ward, I've read your file, the real one, not the sanitized version. I know what you did in Mosul. I know about Kandahar. If you were good enough to survive that, you're good enough to pass this course. The only thing stopping you is the lock we put in your head. Remove that, and there's no question. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing. Mitchell thinks someone's trying to sabotage you. Watch yourself. And if anything happens between now and tomorrow morning, anything at all that seems off, you find me or Rains immediately. Understood? Yes, sir. Then he was gone, leaving Lena alone with her disassembled rifle and a decision that would define the rest of her life. She sat back down at the bench, her hands moving automatically to reassemble her weapon, each piece clicking into place with satisfying precision. The rifle came together perfectly because she knew rifles knew weapons, knew violence, and how to apply it with surgical accuracy. That knowledge had never left her. It had just been caged, locked away behind protocols and conditioning, and someone else's decision about who she was allowed to be. Tomorrow morning, she could take that knowledge back, could become again what she'd been before everything went wrong, could unlock the operator who'd been trapped inside the failing soldier. The question was whether she was brave enough or desperate enough to say yes. Lena didn't sleep that night either. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of breathing from the other candidates, some deep and steady, others fitful and anxious. Tomorrow would determine everything for all of them, but for her, it meant something more than just passing or failing a course. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to reclaim who she used to be or accept the broken version of herself that 3 years of conditioning had created. The weight of that choice pressed down on her chest like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe harder, to think. She kept replaying Maddox's words in her head, "Once I unlock you, there's no going back." What did that mean? Really? Would she become someone else? Would the person she'd been trying to be for the past 3 years, the one who wanted a normal life, who wanted to leave the violence behind, would that person simply cease to exist? At 0400, she gave up on sleep entirely and slipped out of her bunk, moving with the careful silence that was second nature to her. The barracks were dark, except for the dim red emergency lights that cast everything in shadows and blood-colored gloom. She dressed quickly in her PT uniform and made her way outside, needing air, needing space, needing to move before the walls closed in completely. The desert night was cold, the temperature having dropped 40 degrees from the afternoon high. Lena welcomed the chill, let it sharpen her senses, ground her in the physical reality of right now instead of the uncertain future of tomorrow. She started walking, no particular destination in mind, just putting one foot in front of the other in the darkness. She found herself at the kill house without consciously choosing to go there. The structure loomed against the star-scattered sky, a maze of concrete and ballistic walls designed to simulate the worst kind of urban combat. This was where she'd frozen where Peters and Torres had been simulated casualties, because she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't be the operator she knew she was supposed to be. The door was unlocked. It always was, to allow candidates to walk through the layout during off hours to study the angles and plan their approaches. Lena stepped inside the darkness absolute until her eyes adjusted. She moved through the corridors by memory and feel her hands trailing along the walls, her feet finding the floor with practiced silence. In the final room, the one where she'd locked up completely, she stopped. Even now, in the safety of an unoccupied training facility, she could feel the ghost of that panic, the way her body had simply refused to obey the disconnect between intention and action that had cost her everything. "You're up early." Lena spun her body, dropping into a defensive stance before she recognized the voice. Master Chief Rains stood in the doorway, backlit by the faint pre-dawn light, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "Couldn't sleep, Master Chief," she said, forcing herself to relax. "Thought I'd walk the course one more time before tomorrow." "Tomorrow's today now," Rains corrected, stepping into the room. "It's 0430. Your evaluation starts at 0800. That gives you 3.5 hours to figure out who you're going to be when that buzzer sounds." He moved to stand beside her, both of them looking at the space where she'd failed so completely just days ago. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things neither of them were saying. "I know about Maddox," Rains said finally. "Don't know the details, that's above my clearance, but I know he's here because of you. I know he's got some way to help you, or thinks he does. And I know that whatever happens in 3.5 hours is going to be a lot more complicated than a simple evaluation." Lena didn't respond. What could she say that wouldn't violate security protocols or reveal things that were meant to stay buried? "Here's what I do know," Rains continued. "I've been training operators for 15 years. I've seen hundreds of candidates come through, and I've gotten pretty good at reading people. You move like someone who's done this before, not just the training, but the real thing. The way you check your corners when you think no one's watching, the way your hands go to your weapon, when you hear unexpected noise, the way you always position yourself with a clear line to the exits. Those aren't things you learn in a classroom, Ward. Those are things you learn by surviving situations where other people didn't." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder. "But I've also seen the way you lock up under evaluation, the way your hands shake when people are watching, the way you freeze when there's noise and pressure and expectations. And that tells me something happened to you, something that broke the connection between what you know and what you can do. So my question isn't whether you're capable. My question is whether whatever Maddox is offering is going to fix that connection or just give you a different set of problems." Lena turned to face him, fully grateful for the darkness that hid her expression. "What if I don't know the answer to that?" "Then you're going to have to trust your gut," Rains said. "Which is a hell of a thing to ask someone whose gut has been wrong for 3 years. But here's what I'll tell you, and this is just my opinion, not as an instructor, but as someone who's been where you are. Being broken and knowing you're broken is hell. But being fixed and not knowing who you are anymore, that might be worse. So you think I should stay the way I am, let myself wash out?" "I think you should make a decision you can live with," Rains corrected. "Because either way, you're the one who has to live with the consequences. Maddox leaves after today. I go back to training the next class. But you're stuck with yourself for the rest of your life. Make sure you choose a version of yourself you can stand to be around." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. Your evaluation today is going to have observers' standard protocol, but I've limited it to essential personnel only. Me, one safety officer, and Commander Maddox. No other candidates, no brass looking to make an example. If you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do, you'll have as much privacy as I can give you." "Thank you, Master Chief." "Don't thank me yet. You might hate me by the end of the day." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the pre-dawn silence, leaving Lena alone in the room where she'd failed with 3 hours until she'd have to decide whether to fail again or become someone she wasn't sure she wanted to be. She stayed there for another 20 minutes, standing in the darkness, letting the silence settle into her bones. Then she walked back to the barracks, moving with purpose, now her decision made, even if she couldn't quite articulate why. Whatever happened at 0800, she was done being afraid of herself. The morning passed in a blur of routine and nervous energy. Lena went through her pre-evaluation ritual with mechanical precision, checked her gear twice, fired her weapons to confirm 0, reviewed the course layout one final time. The other candidates gave her a wide berth, either out of respect for someone facing their final chance or out of a desire not to be associated with failure. Only Kowalski caught her eye across the equipment yard, gave her a slight nod that might have been encouragement or might have been goodbye. At 07:45, she reported to the staging area outside the main training compound. The course layout was different than anything she'd run before, a combination of multiple disciplines designed to test every aspect of operational capability. Long-range marksmanship transitioning to close-quarters battle obstacle navigation under time pressure, tactical decision-making under stress. It was the kind of comprehensive evaluation that separated true operators from everyone else. Master Chief Rains was already there, along with a safety officer she recognized, but didn't know personally. And standing slightly apart from them both, dressed in casual field clothes that somehow made him look more military than any uniform, was Commander Cole Maddox. His eyes met hers across the staging area, and she saw the question there. Are you ready? Are you sure? Is this really what you want? Lena took a breath and gave the smallest nod, barely a movement, just the slightest inclination of her head that could have been mistaken for adjusting her helmet. But Maddox saw it. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a subtle squaring of his shoulders that said he understood he was ready. They were committed now. Sergeant Ward, Rains's voice was formal, professional, the voice of an instructor addressing a candidate. This is your final evaluation for continuation in the Special Operations Screening Course. You will complete all phases of the course within time standards and safety protocols. Failure to meet standards on any single phase constitutes an overall failure. Do you understand? Yes, Master Chief. Any questions before we begin? No, Master Chief. Then make ready. Lena moved to the starting line. Her rifle slung her sidearm, holstered her body coiled and ready. The course stretched out before her first phase was 200 yards of broken terrain, leading to a shooting position where she'd have to engage 6 targets at ranges from 100 to 400 meters. Then transition to the kill house for close-quarters battle. Then a final phase that involved hostage rescue under simulated fire. It was designed to break her. To confirm what everyone already knew, that she couldn't perform under pressure, that she was damaged goods, that whatever she'd once been was gone forever. But standing there on the line waiting for the buzzer, Lena felt something strange and unfamiliar. Not fear, not anxiety, not the crushing weight of expectation that usually locked her muscles and made her hands shake. Instead, she felt calm, centered, like standing in the eye of a storm with chaos all around, but perfect stillness at the core. On my mark, Rains called out. 3, 2, 1. The buzzer sounded. Lena moved, pushing forward across the broken terrain with fluid efficiency. Her breathing was steady, her movements economical, her mind clear, and focused on the next obstacle, the next movement, the next second. She reached the shooting position and dropped into prone, her rifle coming up smooth and fast, her sight picture perfect. First target 100 meters. Breathe out, squeeze the rifle, speaking its sharp language. The steel rang with impact. Second target 200 meters. Wind correction, breath control, squeeze. Hit. She worked through all 6 targets methodically. No hesitation, no second guessing. Just pure execution. Every shot landed exactly where she intended. Her reload was seamless, her transition between positions efficient. She was performing well, maybe not exceptionally, but solidly competently, the way any qualified operator should. But she could feel it wasn't enough. This was good performance, but it wasn't her. It was still contained, still operating within the boundaries that had been set for her 3 years ago. She was being allowed to function, but not to truly perform. She moved to the second phase, the kill house, her heart rate starting to climb now. This was where she'd failed before. This was where the conditioning had locked her down completely, where the disconnect between knowledge and execution had been most brutal. The door yawned before her like a hungry mouth. She stepped inside, rifle up, moving through the first room with textbook precision. Pop-up hostile, double tap to center mass, friendly target weapon held high and safe. She was moving on training and muscle memory, letting her body do what it knew how to do, trying not to think, not to let conscious thought interrupt the flow. Second room, third room. She was performing adequately, but not exceptionally clearing corners correctly, but cautiously engaging targets effectively, but without the fluid precision that marked true expertise. She could feel the observers watching, could feel Maddox's eyes on her, could feel the weight of judgment and evaluation pressing down. And then she reached the final room, the one where she'd frozen before, where the flashbang simulator had sent her spiraling back to Kandahar and cost her teammates their lives in simulation. She stood at the threshold, her breathing starting to accelerate, the familiar tension building in her shoulders and jaw. This was the moment. This was where she'd fail again, where the conditioning would lock her down, where everyone would confirm what they already knew about her. The instructors had rigged a surprise. She could hear movement inside the room, knew there would be multiple threats, knew this was designed to overwhelm her sensory processing and decision-making. Her hand tightened on her rifle. Her vision started to narrow. She could feel the lock engaging, could feel her body starting to refuse her commands, could feel 3 years of failure and frustration rising up to swallow her whole. Switchback Protocol. Maddox's voice cut through the chaos in her head, calm and steady, and absolutely clear. 3 words spoken with perfect authority. Switchback Protocol, go! And just like that, everything changed. It wasn't like a switch being flipped. It was more like chains falling away, like a door that had been locked, suddenly swinging open, like a part of her brain that had been walled off and isolated, suddenly reconnecting to the rest of her nervous system. The world sharpened. Her breathing steadied. Her hands that had been shaking a second ago, became rock-solid, completely calm, moving with the kind of unconscious precision that came from thousands of hours of training that her conscious mind had forgotten, but her body remembered perfectly. She moved, not cautiously, not tentatively. She moved the way she'd moved in Mosul, in Kandahar, in a dozen other places that officially didn't exist. Fast, fluid, absolutely certain of every angle and every movement. She breached the room hard, her body already processing threats before her conscious mind registered them. 3 pop-up hostiles arranged in a complex pattern designed to force hesitation and bad decisions. But she didn't hesitate. Her rifle tracked from target to target with geometric precision, double-tap rhythm. Each shot placed exactly where it needed to be. Hostile 1 center mass. Hostile 2 high thoracic. Hostile 3 sight picture perfect, despite the awkward angle rounds punching through the vital zone. A friendly target popped up behind a hostile, the kind of setup designed to force mistakes. But her brain was processing information faster than conscious thought. Now her body responding with the kind of muscle memory that had been trained into her cell deep. She transitioned smoothly, her muzzle rising above the friendly, her shots taking the hostile behind it, without a single round going anywhere near the innocent. She moved through the room like water, like wind, like something that couldn't be stopped or contained. Every corner cleared perfectly. Every target engaged with absolute precision. Her reload happened so fast she barely registered doing it. her hands knowing what they needed to do without conscious direction. The exercise ended in record time. She cleared the final hostel, secured the simulated hostage, established a safe perimeter, all within 63 seconds, a time that would have been competitive with the best operators in the program. She stood there in the cleared room, her rifle at low, ready, her breathing calm and controlled, and felt completely and utterly herself for the first time in 3 years. The silence that followed was absolute. She could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong, could hear the slight whisper of wind through the kill house ventilation, could hear distantly someone breathing hard with shock or surprise. She walked out of this kill house and found Rains staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, somewhere between stunned and vindicated, like a man who'd bet everything on a long shot and just watched it come in first. The safety officer was checking his stopwatch, then checking it again like he couldn't believe the numbers. And Maddox stood with his arms crossed, his face carefully neutral, but there was something in his eyes that might have been satisfaction, or might have been concern. He'd unlocked her, proven that the conditioning could be reversed, shown that she was exactly as capable as her record suggested. But they both knew what that meant. They both understood what had just been released back into the world. "Time," Rains asked, his voice rough. 63 seconds, the safety officer reported. "Perfect score on target discrimination. 0 safety violations. It's the best run I've seen in my 2 years at this facility." Rains turned to Lena, his eyes searching her face. "How do you feel?" It was a strange question, more personal than professional, and she understood what he was really asking. "Are you still you? Are you okay? Did we just help you or break you in a different way?" "I feel like myself, Master Chief," she said quietly. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like myself." "Good," Rains nodded slowly. "Because you've got one more phase to complete, and it's the hardest one. Final scenario hostage rescue with multiple hostiles and civilians in a complex environment. You ready?" Was she ready? 3 minutes ago, she would have said no, would have felt the crushing weight of anxiety and expectation. But now, with the conditioning lifted and her full capabilities restored, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: confidence. Not arrogance, not false bravado, but the simple, solid certainty that came from knowing exactly what she was capable of and trusting herself to execute. "Yes, Master Chief, I'm ready." The final scenario was designed to be impossible, or at least impossible to complete perfectly. Multiple rooms, 12 hostiles, 4 hostages, conflicting information, time pressure, and simulation rounds coming from multiple directions. The kind of scenario where success meant accepting losses and making hard choices about who to save and who to sacrifice. But Lena didn't accept that framework. Didn't accept that losses were inevitable, or that hard choices were necessary. She moved through the scenario like she was reading a language that everyone else saw as gibberish, her brain processing the tactical geometry with perfect clarity. She used angles to engage multiple hostiles, simultaneously used cover to protect hostages, while she cleared threats, used timing to ensure that she was always moving, always 2 steps ahead of the scenario designer's expectations. Her shoulder switched smoothly from right to left as she cleared corners, maximizing her field of fire while minimizing her exposure. Her reloads happened in dead space during transitions between rooms when no immediate threats were present. She saved all 4 hostages, neutralized all 12 hostiles, took 0 hits from simulation rounds, and did it all in under 4 minutes, moving with the kind of fluid precision that made it look easy, even though everyone watching knew it absolutely wasn't. When she emerged from the final building, clearing it with the last hostage in tow, she found not just Rains and Maddox waiting, but a small crowd that had gathered. Other candidates who'd heard something was happening, instructors who'd been pulled from other duties to watch, even a few senior officers who'd materialized from wherever senior officers spent their time when they weren't making other people's lives difficult. And standing at the edge of the crowd, his face carved from stone, but his eyes burning with something that might have been anger or might have been fear, was Lieutenant Markham. Rains stepped forward, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent training area. "Sergeant Ward, final evaluation results marksmanship phase, perfect score. Close quarters battle, perfect score. Hostage rescue, perfect score. Overall time, 42 seconds under aggregate standard. Overall performance." He paused, and something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "Best I've seen in 15 years of running this program." The words landed like explosions in the silence. Lena stood there, her rifle slung her hands steady, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but not caring anymore. She'd done it. Not just passed, but excelled. Not just survived, but dominated. She'd proven to them, to herself, to everyone who'd ever doubted her, that she belonged here. Maddox approached her as the crowd began to disperse, his expression carefully neutral. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly, echoing Rain's earlier question. "Different," Lena admitted. "Like someone removed a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Like I can breathe again." "That's good." Maddox's voice dropped even lower. "But Ward, listen to me carefully. What I did today, unlocking the conditioning that's permanent. You can't go back. You're going to have to learn to live with yourself again, learn to integrate who you were with, who you've been. That's not always easy. Some operators struggle with it. You're going to need support, maybe counseling, definitely monitoring." "I understand, sir." "Do you—" His eyes were intense now, boring into hers. "Because I've seen what happens when people like you get unlocked and then can't handle it. I've scraped operators off bathroom floors after they put a gun in their mouth because they couldn't reconcile the things they'd done with the person they wanted to be. I've written letters to families explaining why their son or daughter is in a psychiatric facility after having a complete break from reality. This is not a magic fix, Ward. This is opening a door to a part of yourself that's been locked away for good reasons." "I know the risks," Lena said. "And I'm still standing here, aren't I? Still sane. Still functional. Maybe that means I'm going to be okay." "Maybe," Maddox acknowledged. "Or maybe it just means you haven't fully processed what just happened yet. Either way, you're not alone in this. Mitchell's going to set you up with resources, people who understand what you've been through and what you're going to deal with going forward. Use them. Don't try to tough this out by yourself." "Yes, sir." He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Good run today, Sergeant. You earned your place here." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Lena standing alone in the Nevada desert with her perfect scores and her unlocked mind and the uncertain future stretching out before her. She looked down at her hands. They were steady. They'd been steady all day. They would probably be steady for the rest of her life now, because the lock was gone, and she was herself again, completely, fully without barriers or conditioning or restrictions. The question was whether that was freedom or just a different kind of prison. Only time would tell. The rest of the day unfolded in a strange kind of suspended reality, like Lena was watching her own life from a distance, while simultaneously living it with sharp, almost a painful clarity. Word of her performance spread through Red Mesa faster than wildfire through dry brush, and everywhere she went, she felt the weight of attention that was completely different from the scrutiny she'd endured for the past 2 weeks. Before, people had watched her with pity or contempt or morbid curiosity, waiting for her to fail again. Now they watched her with something else, respect, mixed with wariness, the kind of careful attention you gave to someone who'd just proven themselves far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. She found herself back in the equipment cage, methodically cleaning her weapons, even though they didn't need it, just needing something to do with her hands, while her mind processed everything that had happened. The space was empty, except for her, the other candidates, probably at lunch, or preparing for their own evaluations, giving her the solitude she hadn't realized she desperately needed. The door opened with a metallic creak. Lena's hand went to her sidearm before she consciously registered the movement. Old instincts newly unlocked, responding faster than thought. She forced herself to relax when she saw it was Kowalski the Ranger who'd warned her about the sabotaged rope. "Easy there, Sergeant," he said, hands visible, and empty, a slight smile on his face. "Just wanted to say congratulations. That was one hell of a run this morning." "Thanks." Lena went back to cleaning her rifle, uncomfortable with the attention, even though part of her, a part she'd forgotten existed, preened slightly under the recognition of competence by another professional. Kowalski moved into the cage, picked up a cleaning rod from the supply shelf, started working on his own weapon at the bench across from her. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the familiar rhythm of disassembly and maintenance, creating a kind of comfortable space between them. "Can I ask you something?" Kowalski said finally, not looking up from his bolt carrier group. "And you can tell me to mind my own business if you want." "Go ahead." "What changed?" He met her eyes, now his expression genuinely curious, rather than accusatory. 2 days ago, you couldn't clear a room without freezing up. This morning, you ran the course like you'd been doing it your whole life. I've seen people improve with training, but that wasn't improvement. That was transformation. So what changed? Lena considered how much to tell him, how much she could tell him without violating security protocols or revealing things that were meant to stay classified. But there was something in Kowalski's face, an openness, a genuine desire to understand, rather than judge, that made her want to be honest, at least as honest as she could be. "You ever feel like you're not yourself?" she asked. "Like there's this other person inside you, someone you used to be, but you can't reach them anymore. Like there's a wall between who you are and who you're supposed to be." Kowalski nodded slowly. "After my first deployment, yeah. Came back and felt like I was wearing someone else's skin for about 6 months. Took a long time to feel like myself again." "That's what it was like for me," Lena said. "Except it lasted 3 years instead of 6 months. And this morning someone helped me tear down that wall, helped me find the person I used to be." "The commander," Kowalski said, not quite a question. "Maddox. He said something to you right before you breached that final room. I couldn't hear what it was, but whatever he said, it changed everything." Lena didn't confirm or deny, just kept cleaning her weapon. After a moment, Kowalski nodded, accepting the non-answer for what it was. "Well, whoever you found this morning, I'm glad you found her, because the operator who ran that course today, that's someone I'd want on my 6 in a real-world situation. That's someone who could teach the rest of us things we need to know." He finished reassembling his rifle, checked the action, then stood. "For what it's worth, Ward, I never thought you were a tourist. I just thought you were lost. Glad you found your way back." He left before she could respond, leaving Lena alone again with her thoughts, and her weapons, and the slow, dawning realization that finding herself meant she now had to figure out what to do with the person she'd rediscovered. The afternoon briefing was mandatory for all candidates, a review of the morning's evaluations corrections on common mistakes, guidance for those still working through the screening process. Lena sat in the back row of the briefing room, trying to be inconspicuous, but she could feel eyes on her constantly. Candidates turning around to look at her, whispering to each other, pointing with the kind of obvious gestures that suggested they either didn't care that she noticed or wanted her to notice. Master Chief Rains stood at the front of the room, working through the day's results with methodical precision. He covered other candidates' performances, first good runs, areas for improvement, technical corrections, before finally inevitably reaching Lena's evaluation. Sergeant Ward's performance this morning represents the standard you should all be striving for, Rains said, pulling up footage on the screen behind him. Watch her approach to this room. Notice the angle she takes. She's maximizing her field of view while minimizing her exposure. Her weapon is up and ready before she commits to the threshold. She's not rushing, but she's not hesitating either. She's moving with what we call deliberate speed, fast enough to maintain momentum, and surprise slow enough to process information and make good decisions. The footage showed Lena moving through the kill house, and watching it from outside herself was a strange experience. She barely recognized the operator on screen, the fluid movements, the absolute confidence, the way she seemed to be reading the environment 3 steps ahead of where she actually was. That person looked competent, dangerous, completely in control. That person looked like someone Lena had forgotten she used to be. Now watch this transition. Rains continued, slowing the footage down. She takes a hostile on her right double-tap center mass, but notice her eyes are already tracking left to the next threat. Her brain is processing multiple inputs simultaneously: current threat, next threat, friendly positions, cover positions, exit routes. This is what we mean by combat processing speed. Some people are born with it. Some people develop it through training and experience, but everyone in this room needs to be working toward this level of cognitive performance under stress. He clicked forward through more footage, breaking down her performance with the kind of clinical analysis that made it seem almost surgical, almost simple, as if anyone could do what she'd done if they just understood the principles. But Lena knew better. What Rains was describing wasn't just training or experience, it was something deeper, something that had been built into her through methods she still didn't fully understand, and then locked away for 3 years. Questions? Rains asked, pausing the footage. Peters raised his hand. Master Chief, with respect, how is it possible for someone to go from failing basic drills to running a perfect course in the span of 48 hours? That's not normal improvement. That's not even possible through training. The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. Lena could feel the room's attention shift, could feel the unspoken accusation beneath Peter's words. Something's not right here. Someone's cheating. This isn't fair. Rains studied Peters for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You're right, Petty Officer Peters. That's not normal improvement through training. But this isn't a normal training environment, and not everyone who comes through here has a normal background. Some operators have skill sets and experience that aren't immediately apparent. Some operators have been through things they can't talk about, done things that aren't in their official records, proven themselves in environments we can't replicate here. Sergeant Ward is one of those operators. So she gets special treatment, Peters pressed. She gets to fail for 2 weeks and then suddenly passes because someone pulls strings. She gets evaluated by the same standards as everyone else, Rains said, his voice hardening. And she met those standards at a level that exceeds most of the candidates in this room. If you have a problem with her performance, Peters, then I suggest you focus on improving your own performance instead of questioning hers, because I've got your eval scores right here, and you're currently sitting at 73%, barely above the cut line. Maybe worry less about how other people are succeeding, and more about why you're not. Peter's face flushed red, but he didn't respond. The room went quiet, the kind of silence that came from people who'd just watched someone get publicly dressed down, and were grateful it wasn't them. Anyone else? Rains asked, his gaze sweeping the room. No one spoke. Good. Dismissed. Next evaluations are tomorrow at 600 for those of you still in the running. I suggest you spend tonight reviewing your fundamentals instead of worrying about other people's business. The candidates filed out, most avoiding Lena's eyes, though a few nodded respectfully as they passed. Peters and Torres shot her looks that were pure venom, but they kept their mouths shut, probably calculating whether it was worth antagonizing someone who'd just demonstrated she could run tactical circles around them. Markham was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at her. Their eyes met across the briefing room, and for a moment Lena saw something complex in his expression. Not quite jealousy, not quite respect. Something harder to define. Then he nodded once, a slight acknowledgement that might have been congratulations, or might have been a different kind of warning, and left. Lena stayed in her seat, waiting for the room to fully clear before she moved. Raines was still at the front, shutting down the equipment, organizing his notes. When he was done, he turned to her. "Walk with me, Sergeant." It wasn't a request. Lena followed him out of the briefing room and across the compound past the training facilities and equipment yards toward the administrative buildings. They walked in silence for several minutes before Raines spoke. "I need you to understand something," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "What happened this morning, that wasn't just about you passing a course. That was about proving something to people who've been watching this facility, watching this program, looking for reasons to shut us down or change how we operate. There are people in Washington who think special operations training has become too insular, too secretive, too willing to bend rules for candidates who have the right connections or the right clearances." He paused, checking their surroundings before continuing. "Your performance this morning was so far beyond normal improvement that it's going to raise questions. Peters wasn't wrong about that. It's not normal, it's not standard, and it's going to look suspicious to anyone who doesn't know the full story. Which means I need to know, is there anything about your situation that's going to come back and bite this program? Anything. I need to be prepared to defend or explain." Lena considered her words carefully. "My improvement was the result of addressing a medical issue that had been impacting my performance. The issue has been resolved. I'm fully capable of performing at the level you saw this morning, and that capability is sustainable. Nothing I've done violates any regulation or policy. Everything was done with proper authorization from people with appropriate clearance levels." It was technically true, even if it left out about 90% of the actual story. But it was the truth. Raines needed to hear the version that would protect him and the program if questions came down from higher up. Raines studied her face clearly, trying to decide how much he believed and how much he wanted to know. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, I'm going to trust you on that, Ward. But understand this, if it comes out that there was something improper about your evaluation, it doesn't just affect you. It affects every candidate who comes through here, every operator who gets certified through this program, every mission that relies on personnel we've trained and vetted. So whatever secrets you're carrying, make damn sure they stay secret." "Yes, Master Chief." They'd reached the admin building, now the same building where the black SUV had been parked the day before. Raines stopped at the entrance, turned to face her fully. "One more thing. Your performance this morning earned you a passing grade, but it also earned you some attention you might not want. I've already had 3 requests from various commands asking about you, wanting to know your background, wanting to know if you're available for tasking. One of those requests came from a Joint Special Operations Command liaison. They're always looking for operators with your skill set for specialized teams." Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. JSOC. Joint Special Operations Command. The people who ran the darkest, most classified operations in the entire military structure. The people who'd probably been involved in Switchback from the beginning. The people who might want to lock her away again, or worse, put her back into operational rotation for missions she'd thought she'd left behind. "What did you tell them?" she asked. "That you're currently enrolled in training and unavailable for tasking until course completion." Rain's expression softened slightly. "But Ward, you need to understand people are going to want to use you. You demonstrated capabilities this morning that are rare, valuable, and highly sought after. You're going to have to make some decisions about what you want your career to look like going forward. Do you want to go back to operational duty? Do you want to stay in training command? Do you want to try for a normal life outside of special operations?" "I don't know," Lena admitted. "This morning was the first time in 3 years I've felt like myself. I haven't had time to think about what comes next." "Well, you better start thinking about it," Rains said, "because the military doesn't give you much time to figure yourself out. They're going to want an answer, and they're going to want you making yourself useful. My suggestion, finish the course, get certified. Then take some leave, get your head straight, and decide what kind of operator you want to be. Because you get to choose now, Ward. That's the gift you've been given choice. Don't waste it." He left her standing outside the admin building, his words echoing in her head. Choice. The gift of choice. But was it really a gift, if every choice came with impossible consequences? The evening meal in the mess hall was a surreal experience. Lena sat at her usual corner table, but this time she wasn't alone. Kowalski joined her without asking, followed by Ramirez and Chen operators, who'd been quietly professional with her from the start, but hadn't actively sought her company until now. They didn't make a big deal of it, didn't reference her morning performance directly, just sat down and started talking about normal things, upcoming evaluations, terrible mess hall food plans for the weekend, if they made it through the week. It took Lena a few minutes to realize what they were doing accepting her, welcoming her into the informal community of competent professionals who'd proven themselves and earned the right to be here. It was a kind of validation she hadn't realized she'd been craving, and it settled something inside her that had been raw and uncertain since that morning. "So, I heard a rumor," Chen said, pushing his food around his tray. "Heard that the instructors are considering fast-tracking your certification, having you skip the final 2 weeks of training and go straight to graduation." Lena blinked. "Where'd you hear that?" "Overheard Master Chief talking to Colonel Hendricks after your eval," Chen said. "Something about you've clearly demonstrated mastery of the required skills, and there's no point making you sit through basic instruction when you could be doing something more useful." "That's not a rumor that's confirmed," Ramirez added. "I heard the same thing from my instructor. Apparently there's precedent for it. Operators with prior SOF experience sometimes get accelerated through if they demonstrate exceptional capability." Lena wasn't sure how she felt about that. Part of her wanted to finish the course properly to earn her place the same way everyone else did, to prove that her morning performance wasn't a fluke. But another part of her, the newly unlocked part that remembered who she was and what she was capable of, knew that sitting through 2 more weeks of instruction she didn't need would be a waste of everyone's time. "What would you do?" she asked the table at large. "If they offered to fast-track you?" "Take it in a heartbeat," Chen said immediately. "Why waste time proving something you've already proven?" "I'd want to finish," Kowalski countered. "Not because I need the training, but because there's value in going through the process with your cohort. Builds bonds, builds trust. The guys you go through selection with, they're the guys you'll be working with in the field. You skip out early and you miss that." "Yeah, but Ward's situation is different," Ramirez pointed out. "She's not new to this. She's already got operational experience, we can all tell just from how she moves. This course is probably remedial for her at this point. Why make her sit through remedial instruction when she could be doing real work?" They debated the merits back and forth, and Lena listened with half her attention, while the other half worked through the larger implications. Fast-tracking meant leaving Red Mesa, soon meant making decisions about her future, meant confronting all the questions she'd been avoiding about who she was and what she wanted. But it also meant moving forward instead of staying stuck in limbo. And after 3 years of being stuck, maybe forward motion, any forward motion was better than staying still. The decision was taken out of her hands the next morning when she was summoned to Colonel Hendrix's office. The same office where just days ago he'd told her she was being dismissed for medical reasons. Now she sat across from his desk, while he reviewed a folder that was considerably thicker than it had been at their last meeting. "Sergeant Ward," Hendrix said without preamble. "I've reviewed your evaluation results, consulted with Master Chief Rains and Commander Maddox, and made a decision about your status in this program." Lena's heart hammered, even though logic told her this wasn't going to be bad news. Still, the memory of failure was fresh enough that she couldn't quite trust that things had really changed. "Based on your demonstrated proficiency across all training domains, I'm authorizing your immediate certification for Joint Special Operations duty. You'll be advanced to graduate status, effective immediately with full course completion credited to your record. You'll have 72 hours to clear the facility and report to your next assignment." Relief and anxiety hit Lena simultaneously. It was over. She'd passed. She was certified. But 72 hours meant she had 3 days to figure out what came next, and she still had no idea what that should be. "Thank you, sir," she managed. "May I ask what my next assignment will be?" Hendrix leaned back in his chair, studying her with an expression that was hard to read. "That's the interesting part. You've got 3 offers on the table, all from different commands. JSOC wants you for a direct action team. 5th Special Forces Group wants you for advanced training cadre. And there's a third offer less conventional from a joint task force that operates under classified mandate. They've requested you specifically by name, which suggests someone in that organization knows exactly who you are and what you're capable of." The third option made Lena's skin crawl. Someone requesting her by name could only mean one thing: someone from her Switchback days. Someone who knew what she'd been, what she'd done, what she could do now that the conditioning was lifted. Someone who wanted to use her for the exact kind of operations she'd been trying to leave behind. "Do I have to choose immediately?" she asked. "You've got 48 hours, Hendrix said. "After that, I'll need an answer so I can cut your orders. My suggestion? Take some leave first. Get your head straight. These are all high-tempo positions that are going to demand everything you've got. Make sure you're ready before you commit." "Yes, sir." Hendrix closed the folder, his expression softening slightly. "Off the record, Ward, what happened to you here at Red Mesa? Whatever was going on with your performance issues, that's between you and your own conscience. But I want you to know that your performance yesterday was the real deal. That was someone who knows what they're doing, who's done it before, who can be trusted to do it again. Whatever demons you were fighting, whatever obstacles you overcame, you should be proud of yourself. Not everyone could have done what you did." The words landed harder than Lena expected, hitting some emotional place she'd been carefully walling off since Maddox had spoken the unlock phrase. She felt her throat tighten, felt something that might have been tears trying to force their way up. But she pushed it down, locked it away, kept her composure like the professional she'd been trained to be. "Thank you, sir." "Dismissed, Sergeant. And congratulations." Lena left the office in a daze, walking through the afternoon heat without really seeing her surroundings, her mind spinning through the implications of everything that had just happened. 3 offers. 3 completely different paths forward. And 48 hours to decide which version of herself she wanted to be. She found herself back at the range without consciously deciding to go there, drawn by the familiarity and the relative solitude. She signed out a rifle and some ammunition, then walked out to her lucky lane number 7 and started shooting. Not fast, not with any particular drill in mind, just letting her body remember the rhythm of breathing and squeezing and watching the target accept her rounds with perfect precision. This was who she was. This was what she did. For better or worse, This was the person Commander Maddox had unlocked, the person who'd been buried under 3 years of conditioning and self-doubt. An operator. A weapon. A tool designed for a very specific purpose. The question was whether that was all she wanted to be, or whether there was room for something else, something more human, more normal, more like the life that civilians took for granted. She didn't have an answer. And with 48 hours to decide, and 3 very different futures waiting, she wasn't sure she'd find one in time. The sun was setting over Red Mesa when Lena finally left the range, her hands smelling of gun oil and copper, her mind no clearer than it had been hours ago. She'd burned through 300 rounds trying to find clarity in the rhythm of shooting, but all she'd found was the confirmation that her body remembered everything, every technique, every principle, every hard-won lesson from operations that officially never happened. The base was quieter now, most candidates either at dinner or in their barracks preparing for the next day's evaluations. Lena walked past the mess hall without going in, not hungry, not ready to face more questions or congratulations, or the weight of other people's expectations. She just wanted to be alone with her thoughts, to figure out who she was now that the chains were off. She was halfway to the barracks when she heard footsteps behind her, not trying to be stealthy, but not advertising their presence either. She turned to find Lieutenant Markham approaching, his hands in his pockets, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Sergeant Ward," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Got a minute?" Every instinct told her this was a bad idea, that nothing good could come from a conversation with someone who'd spent 2 weeks making her life miserable. But she was tired of running from difficult conversations, tired of avoiding confrontation, tired of being afraid of what other people might say or think. "Sure, sir. What do you need?" Markham looked uncomfortable, like he was about to say something that didn't come naturally to him. He glanced around, making sure they were relatively alone, then met her eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "The way I treated you these past 2 weeks, the comments, the exclusion, putting you on rear security, when I knew you could do more, that was unprofessional. It was bullying dressed up as leadership, and I'm not proud of it." Lena stared at him, genuinely shocked. An apology was the last thing she'd expected from Markham. "I told myself I was helping," he continued, his voice rough with something that might have been shame. "Told myself that if you couldn't handle some ribbing and social pressure, you definitely couldn't handle real operational stress. Told myself I was doing everyone a favor by weeding out the weak link. But the truth is I was just being a dick because it made me feel better about my own insecurities." "What insecurities?" Lena asked, genuinely curious. "You've been crushing every evaluation since day 1. "Yeah, because this is all I've got," Markham said. "I came up through ROTC, never deployed, spent 3 years in admin billets pushing paper while people like you were actually doing the job. I'm good at training environments because training environments are controlled, predictable, clean. But I've never done the real thing. Never been shot at, never had to make life or death decisions under fire, never had to live with the consequences of those decisions. So when I saw you, someone who clearly had real experience, who moved like a professional, even when you were failing, it scared me. Made me feel like a fraud." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "And then yesterday morning when you ran that course, when I saw what you're actually capable of, it didn't just scare me. It humbled me. Because that's the standard. That's what a real operator looks like. And I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll get there eventually, but right now, I'm just a guy who's good at tests, pretending to be something I'm not." Lena didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to accept the apology graciously and move on. Part of her wanted to stay angry, to nurse the grudge, to make him feel as small as he'd made her feel. But mostly she just felt tired. Tired of conflict, tired of carrying resentment, tired of wasting energy on things that didn't matter anymore. I appreciate the apology, she said finally. And for what it's worth, being good in training environments isn't nothing. Most people can't do what you do. The fact that you haven't deployed yet doesn't make you less of a soldier. It just means you haven't had the opportunity. If you want that opportunity, if you want to be more than just good at tests, then keep pushing yourself. Keep learning. Keep being humble enough to recognize when you're wrong. Markham nodded slowly. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me to go to hell if you want. Go ahead. What happened to you? I mean, I know it's none of my business, but the transformation yesterday, that wasn't normal. That wasn't just someone having a good day or getting in the zone. That was someone becoming a completely different operator. So what happened? Where did that person come from? Lena considered how to answer, weighing security protocols against the genuine curiosity in Markham's face. Finally, she said, sometimes people get broken in ways that aren't visible. Sometimes the breaking happens inside where no one can see it, and it takes a long time to heal. I was broken for a long time. Someone helped me heal. That's all. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. Markham studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Well, whoever helped you, they did the world a favor. Because the operator who ran that course yesterday is someone who can save lives, who can make a difference, who can do things most of us can only aspire to. He offered his hand. Good luck with whatever comes next, Sergeant Ward. I hope you find what you're looking for. Lena shook his hand, feeling some of the anger and resentment she'd been carrying finally start to dissolve. Markham wasn't a villain. He was just a young officer trying to figure out who he was making mistakes along the way, like everyone else. She could forgive that. She could move past it. Good luck to you too, sir. I think you're going to be a better officer than you give yourself credit for. Markham smiled a real smile this time, not the predatory grin she'd come to associate with him, and walked away, leaving Lena alone in the gathering darkness, with one less burden to carry. That night's sleep came easier than it had in weeks. Lena lay in her bunk, listening to the familiar sounds of the barracks, but instead of anxiety and dread, she felt something closer to peace. Not complete peace. There were still too many unanswered questions for that, but at least the crushing weight of failure had lifted. At least she knew who she was again, even if she didn't know what to do with that knowledge. She woke before dawn, as she always did, and found herself walking toward the training compound one last time. The base was still dark and quiet, just the first hints of gray light touching the eastern horizon. She walked past the ranges and obstacle courses, past the kill house, where she'd found herself again, past all the places where she'd struggled and failed and finally succeeded. She ended up at the records building where a large board displayed the top course times for various training evolutions. Her name was there now, written in fresh marker at the top of multiple categories. Ward L, 63 seconds. Ward L, 4:17. Ward L, perfect score. She stared at those entries for a long time, feeling the weight of what they represented. Proof that she wasn't broken. Proof that she was still capable. Proof that 3 years of doubt and failure hadn't destroyed the operator she'd been trained to be. Someone had taped a small card beneath her best time white cardstock with careful handwriting. She leaned closer to read it. Containment capacity. Lena smiled, recognizing the message. Rains probably, or maybe Maddox, leaving a reminder that just because something was locked away didn't mean it stopped existing. That capacity remained capacity whether it was being used or not. That she'd always been capable, she'd just been contained. She pulled out her own pen, found another card in the display holder, and wrote her own message. She taped it next to the first one, then stepped back to read both together. Containment capacity. Measure people by what they're built to do, not by what you saw on their worst day. It felt right. It felt true. And maybe someone else struggling through this course, someone else dealing with their own invisible battles would see those messages and find some comfort in knowing they weren't alone. The next 2 days passed in a blur of administrative processing gear inventory and farewells. Lena cleared her equipment, signed her paperwork, and said goodbye to the operators she'd trained with. Kowalski gave her his contact information and made her promise to stay in touch. Ramirez and Chen both said they hoped they'd work with her again someday. Even some of the instructors who'd watched her struggle for 2 weeks came by to shake her hand and tell her they'd known she had it in her all along. On her final evening at Red Mesa, Lena found herself sitting outside the barracks, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and red. Master Chief Rains appeared and sat down beside her without asking, the two of them watching the light fade in comfortable silence. "You figure out what you're going to do?" Rains asked eventually. "I think so," Lena said. "I'm going to turn down all 3 offers." Rains raised an eyebrow. "That's a bold move. You've got commands competing for you, and you're going to tell all of them no." "I'm going to tell them not yet," Lena corrected. "I'm going to request assignment to Training Command. I want to be an instructor. I want to teach other operators what I've learned, help them develop their skills, maybe help identify when someone's struggling because they're incapable versus when they're struggling because something's blocking their capability." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I've taken enough, Master Chief. I've done my time in the dark places doing the hard things that need doing. Now I want to give back. I want to help create the next generation of operators who will be better prepared than I was, who will have better support systems, who will know that struggling doesn't mean failing, and that failure doesn't mean you're broken." Rains was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gruff with something that might have been emotion. "That's a good choice, Ward. Takes wisdom to know when you've done enough when it's time to pass the torch, instead of carrying it yourself. And God knows we need more instructors who understand that difference, who can see past the surface performance to what's really going on with a candidate." "I learned from the best," Lena said, glancing at him. "You kept betting on me when everyone else had written me off. You gave me time when you could have just processed my dismissal and moved on. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. That's the kind of instructor I want to be." "You'll be a good one," Rains said. "Better than me, probably, because you've been on both sides of it. You know what it's like to be the candidate who's struggling, and you know what it's like to be the operator who has to push through anyway. That perspective is valuable. Use it well." They sat in silence as the last light faded from the sky, and the stars began to emerge, thousands of them, more visible here in the desert than anywhere else Lena had ever been. She thought about the path that had brought her here, all the choices and chances and failures and successes that had led to this moment. Thought about the 3 years she'd spent lost inside her own head, trapped by conditioning she hadn't understood and couldn't fight. Thought about Maddox's 3 words that had unlocked her, given her back to herself, made her whole again, even if that wholeness came with its own complications. And she thought about tomorrow, when she'd leave Red Mesa and begin figuring out what came next, not as someone running from her past or trying to reclaim who she used to be, but as someone building something new from the pieces of both. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared that without the pressure of evaluation and the structure of training, I'll lose myself again. Scared that the unlocking was temporary, that I'll wake up one day and find out it didn't take. Scared that I'm making the wrong choice about what to do next." "Good," Rains said. "Fear means you're taking this seriously, that you understand the stakes. The operators I worry about are the ones who aren't scared, who think they've got everything figured out, who don't respect the weight of the decisions they're making. You're scared because you're smart enough to know that there are no perfect choices, only choices you can live with." He stood dusted off his uniform. "For what it's worth. Ward, I think you're going to be fine. I think the unlocking was real, and it's going to stick. I think you're going to make a hell of an instructor. And I think whatever you build from here is going to be something worth building. So stop being scared and start being excited. You earned this second chance. Don't waste it by doubting yourself." He left her there with the stars and the desert and the quiet certainty that he was right. She had earned this. She had fought for it, struggled through it, survived it. And now she got to choose what came next. Not what the military wanted from her, not what her past demanded of her, but what she wanted for herself. The next morning, Lena loaded her duffel into the transport vehicle that would take her to the airfield. A few other graduating candidates were also leaving, heading to their various assignments with the excitement and nervousness of people beginning new chapters. Lena felt that same mixture of emotions, but underneath it was something more solid, a foundation of self-knowledge that she'd been missing for 3 years. As the vehicle pulled away from Red Mesa, Lena looked back one last time at the place where she'd failed and struggled and finally found herself again. The morning sun was already turning the desert harsh and bright, erasing the gentler colors of dawn. Somewhere in that complex, other candidates were beginning their evaluations, running their courses, fighting their own battles against doubt and limitation and fear. She hoped they all found what they were looking for. She hoped they all discovered their own capacity, whether it had been contained or simply undeveloped. She hoped they all learned what she'd learned, that failure wasn't the end of the story, just a chapter in a longer narrative that they got to write themselves. And she hoped that someday, when she was standing in front of a classroom of new candidates as an instructor, she'd remember what it felt like to be where they were struggling, uncertain, wondering if they had what it took. She'd remember to look past the surface performance to see the person underneath. She'd remember that the quiet ones, the struggling ones, the ones everyone else had written off, sometimes they were the ones with the most to give, if someone would just help them unlock it. The transport vehicle hit the main road and accelerated, leaving Red Mesa behind in a cloud of dust. Lena settled back in her seat, feeling the weight of her rifle case against her leg, the familiar presence of her gear secured around her. These were the tools of her trade, the physical manifestations of who she was and what she did. They'd been with her through the worst days of her life, and the best ones too, and they'd be with her wherever she went next. 3 weeks later, Lena stood in front of her first class of candidates at Fort Bragg, home of the Army's Special Operations Training Command. 25 faces looked back at her, some confident, some nervous, all of them wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. She recognized that mixture of determination and doubt, because she'd felt it herself so recently. "My name is Sergeant Ward," she said, her voice carrying across the classroom with the kind of quiet authority that came from lived experience. "I'm going to be one of your primary instructors for close-quarters battle and tactical decision-making. Before we get started, I want to tell you something important, something I wish someone had told me years ago." She paused, making eye contact with several candidates, reading their body language, noting who sat with confidence and who looked like they were already preparing for failure. "Some of you are going to struggle in this course. Some of you are going to fail evaluations, miss standards, wonder if you have what it takes to be here. And when that happens, when you're standing on the line feeling like you're not good enough, I want you to remember this struggling doesn't mean you're incapable. It just means you're being challenged. And being challenged is the only way you grow." She saw a few heads nod, saw recognition in some faces, the ones who'd already been struggling, who'd already wondered if they belonged. "I also want you to remember to respect the quiet ones in your class. The ones who don't brag about their accomplishments, who don't need to prove anything to anyone, who just show up every day and do the work. Those people have often seen things you haven't done, Things they can't talk about earned the right to be quiet about their capabilities. Don't mistake silence for weakness or caution for incompetence. Sometimes the most dangerous operators are the ones you least expect. A few candidates glanced at each other, processing that. Lena saw one woman in the back, small, quiet, sitting with perfect posture, but eyes that mapped every exit and recognized something of herself in that careful awareness. And finally, Lena continued, I want you to know that this training is designed to push you to your limits and beyond. It's designed to find your breaking point and then teach you how to function past it. But here's the thing, everyone's breaking point is different. Everyone's path through this course is going to be unique. So don't compare yourself to the person next to you. Don't assume that because someone else is succeeding in a way that looks easy, your struggle means you're failing. We all have our own battles to fight our own demons, to face our own capacity to unlock. She let that settle for a moment, then smiled slightly. Now let's talk about room clearing techniques. I'm going to show you how to move through a structure with maximum efficiency and minimum exposure. Watch carefully because I'm only going to demonstrate this once at full speed, and then we're going to break it down piece by piece until every single one of you can execute it perfectly. She moved to the demonstration area, her body falling into the familiar patterns of movement that had been unlocked months ago and had stayed unlocked ever since. The candidates watched with varying degrees of comprehension as she flowed through the mock structure, demonstrating angles and timing and decision-making with the kind of fluid precision that came from doing something so many times it became instinctive. When she finished, she turned back to the class and saw what she'd hoped to see: respect, attention, and most importantly the belief that if she could do it, maybe they could too. That was the gift she wanted to give them, the lesson she'd learned the hard way. Capability wasn't about never struggling. It was about learning to struggle effectively, about finding the strength to keep moving forward even when everything felt impossible. After class, the quiet woman from the back approached her hesitantly. Up close, Lena could see the signs she'd learned to recognize: the careful awareness, the controlled breathing, the way her hands stayed visible, but ready, the eyes that never stopped scanning. "Ma'am," the woman said quietly, "I just wanted to say thank you for what you said in there about the quiet ones, about struggling not meaning you're failing." "You doing okay in the course?" Lena asked gently. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm posting middle-tier scores. Nothing terrible, but nothing exceptional either. And I know I'm capable of more. I can feel it. But something's blocking me, and I can't figure out what." Lena's chest tightened with recognition. She saw herself in this woman, saw the frustration and confusion and self-doubt that came from knowing you were capable, but being unable to access that capability. "What's your name?" she asked. "Private First Class Sarah Chen, ma'am." "Chen, I want you to do something for me. Come to the range tomorrow morning at Uro 500 before the rest of the class. No evaluation, no observers, just you and me and some targets. I want to see how you shoot when nobody's watching." Chen's eyes widened slightly. Why? Because sometimes people perform differently under different conditions. Sometimes the evaluation itself is what's holding you back, not your actual capability. So let's remove the evaluation and see what happens. Understanding dawned in Chen's face, along with something that might have been hope. "Yes, ma'am. I'll be there." As Chen walked away, Lena felt something settle into place, a sense of purpose that had been missing since she'd left Red Mesa. This was what she was meant to do now. Not running operations in the dark places of the world, not being the sharp end of the spear, but helping forge the next generation of operators who would be that sharp end. Helping identify when someone was struggling because of limitations versus when they were struggling because of obstacles that could be removed. She'd been given a second chance, had been unlocked, and set free from the conditioning that had trapped her. And now she was going to use that freedom to help others find their own, unlock their own path forward, their own capacity that was waiting to be discovered. That evening, as the sun set over Fort Bragg and the base settled into the quiet rhythm of evening, Lena walked to the training records building and found the board where course records were displayed. Her time from Red Mesa was still there, still at the top of multiple categories, a permanent reminder of what she'd accomplished. She pulled out a card she'd been carrying since she left Nevada and taped it to the board where every candidate who passed through would see it. Measure people by what they're built to do, not by what you saw on their worst day. Then she walked back to her office, ready to begin the next chapter of a story that had started with failure and struggled through doubt, and finally arrived at a place that felt like home. Not because it was easy or comfortable, but because it was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Becoming exactly who she'd fought so hard to become. She was an instructor now, a teacher, a guide for others walking the same difficult path she'd walked. And if she could help even one candidate find their own, unlock their own capacity, their own strength, they didn't know they had, then every failure, every struggle, every moment of doubt she'd endured would have been worth it. Because that was what strength really looked like, not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to keep fighting even when the outcome was uncertain, and then using what you'd learned to help others do the same.